Greetings, first years. I am back to give you a second lesson for Learning Unit 1 on Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from 2019. You can count this basically as your second lecture for this module. I'm going to keep it to hopefully sort of 10 to 15 minutes so that it's nice and short and easy for you to watch quickly. Do stay till the end because I'm going to give you instructions for an ICE task. So at the end of the video, you'll find your first ICE task requirements. For me, it will be due on the 21st of August. So let's get into it. This is what I'm going to do here is sort of do an analysis of the first 20 minutes of the movie, how the movie basically starts and how it puts into place all of these characters and plot lines that get things going, introduce us to a world, and the ways in which Tarantino kind of teaches us about where we are in time and who we're dealing with and what the basic premise of the film is and how it's going to unfold. Okay, so the movie doesn't actually start with the movie itself, weirdly enough. It actually starts with a TV show within the movie. And very quickly, as an audience, we're aware that we're not watching the film reality, but we're watching like a constructed, made up TV show that exists within the world of the film that we haven't started watching yet. And we know it's a TV show because it's got all of these kind of typical, stereotypical elements of a cheesy, made in Hollywood television show from about the 1960s. Okay, it's in black and white. It's got the music of a TV show. It's got the graphics of a TV show. It's called Bounty Law. And if you've watched enough TV and movies like I have, you know pretty quickly that what genre of TV show we're in. This is a typical Western, okay? And a Western TV show would be something obviously set in America, in the Midwest of America, kind of in the Texas, California, Arizona, New Mexico area, during sort of the 1800s, 1840s to 1890s or so. It involved cowboys, outlaws, dusty towns, bounty hunters, Native Americans, or as they would have been called then, Indians, and usually had a kind of a bad guy and a good guy who would face off in some kind of a duel or a shootout by the end of the episode, by the end of the movie. These kind of TV shows, just very schlocky, like rubbish, trash TV, I guess you would call it, was just the staple of Hollywood in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. The Western was very, very popular among audiences, and it was a very easy, cheap thing for the studios to make over and over and over again. And it gave a lot of professional actors like Rick Dalton, the main character in the movie, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, just an endless number of roles to play. Usually the hero, he would be the good guy, and that's what made him a star and popular and in demand. And it's got all the looks and sorry, not the looks, but the feel, the images, the music of a Western. And we know pretty soon as an audience that we're not watching the movie yet. And this gives away kind of what it is that Tarantino is going to do in the rest of the film, which is that he's interested in making a movie that is about the production of movies and TV itself, right? So we're going to get this a lot. There's a TV show in the movie or a movie within the movie. And Tarantino will always be playing around with the very fuzzy line between what's real and what's just made up, between what's actually going on and what is just a pretense, and between what is a story and what is actual history. He likes to play around with these things, confuse us, take license with what's true and what's inauthentic and so on, and kind of mix it all up together in a heady mix. We move from this Bounty Law TV show into yet another TV show, kind of a documentary style TV interview where a journalist and interviewer is interviewing the real Rick Dalton. He's out of character now. And here we're also introduced to Brad Pitt. And we're kind of staying in this TV reality world because the color, black and white, has remained the same. And this TV interview guy is telling us exactly what he's doing and what he's up to, right? He's interviewing these two stars. So we see Rick Dalton, and we're introduced now to Brad Pitt, who turns out to be his stunt double. I'm sure you know what a stunt double is. Basically, it's the guy who does all the dangerous moves during a TV or a film production, in place of the huge TV star. Like a TV star won't do his own stunts because it's just too dangerous. So they get a professional stuntman to do it for them, because he knows how to do all the techniques and keep himself safe. But that again introduces something of the double into the story, right? Where Rick has a sort of a second self who is his stunt double. He has a fake version of himself, right? So there again, very quickly, we're introduced to this theme of true versus untrue, authentic versus inauthentic, real life versus made up life. So very quickly, in all these decisions Tarantino has made and has presented us with in the beginning of the film, we're introduced to this larger theme of things within things, of doubles, of being unsure which is the real one, okay, or at least having that in our mind as a question. We also soon discover, because finally we move into the reality of the movie, the actual quote unquote real story that Tarantino is telling us. And this reality is kind of far removed from the TV show reality, where everything is great. Rick's the hero. In the real world, he's actually a fading TV star. His career is on the wane. He's getting older. He's getting fewer parts. He's earning less money. He's taking meetings with executives and agents who are telling him, you know, you're too old to be the good guy. You've lost your looks. What you should do rather is play villains, play the bad guy. And that's when Rick clicks that his career is sort of possibly coming to an end. And the only roles he can look forward to now are either, you know, secondary roles or bigger roles, but in very bad movies that he actually doesn't want to be in. He gets offered a role in these genre film called the spaghetti western, which were westerns made in Italy by Italian directors, and which Rick thinks is going to be just an absolute bomb. But little does he know that those movies actually would become very famous one day. So he's setting himself up for a success he doesn't know is coming. But I'll cover that in another class. So what's going on here is like Rick Dalton is humiliated. Basically, we actually see him cry and break down at one point, and he's being consoled by Cliff Booth / Brad Pitt, who's his stunt double, like I said. But his career is also over because he, if Rick's not getting much work, neither is he. Nobody really wants to work with Cliff Booth because he's got a bad reputation. Rumor has it that he murdered his wife and got away with it, so he comes from a shady past. And he's kind of resorted to being Rick's driver / personal assistant. What's interesting about these two characters as a setup, beyond the double feature, the real versus the unreal, is that we also know that the movie is about a major historical event, right? Something that really happened, something that's true and notorious, which is the murder of Sharon Tate. I covered that last time in class. And we know the film is going to be about that it's building up to that. But what Tarantino has done is that he's not focusing on Sharon Tate, who you think would be the main character in that story. What he's doing is focusing on all these people on the fringes of the story, people who operate desperately on the margins. They're small-time players. They're kind of unknown people. They're fading stars. They're people whose best life is past them now. And that's very typical of Tarantino. That's kind of one of his signature moves, is that he likes to focus on unexpected elements within a story. He likes to focus on people who are not typically the heroes, people who are written off, people who have lost in the game of life. They're outcasts, fringe figures, marginal characters. In other films, he's looked at kind of desperate characters, people who've been forgotten, small town crooks, drug dealers, killers, basically people who are not the main feature at all, or maybe used to be, but aren't anymore. So he's looking at this, he's trying to tell the story of a major event, but he's doing it from the perspective of people who circulate around that event, which is an unexpected reversal of the story already. So he's looking at things from an odd, kind of skewed perspective, surprising perspective. That's another thing that's always interesting about his films, is where is the position from which he decides to tell the story. Okay, all of those elements I've just mentioned combined, I think, to establish the overarching theme of the film, which is that Tarantino is really obsessed as a director with how film, media, TV, entertainment all come together to create our world as modern human beings. It really is a calling card of his to use multimedia entertainment as part of his films. He will use terrible genre TV shows with ridiculous plots, bad actors, kung fu movies, radio shows, and news reports, and just mush them all together to create a sense of what modern life is like, which is that we as modern human beings are just surrounded by media all the time. And by media, I mean representations of the world that come to us through radio, television, films, and any other kind of screen or device. Most notably now, in our days, the smartphone, iPhones, and all the rest of it, right? These things, these devices we have in our back pockets are mediating devices. They suck in the world, they distort what we see, and they turn it into a new reality for us, often via the means of, say, social media, right? Where people, whatever they do, whatever it is that they're doing, they're making media. They're choosing to film something, they're framing in a certain way, they're creating an idea, an effect, a feeling, which we then consume. What we are not consuming is the literal reality in itself. We're consuming a secondary mediated reality. And we are just pounded all the time with that secondary mediated reality that comes with built-in biases. It's been edited, changed, distorted, even if it's not really all that different to the reality. The fact that somebody chose to film that, edit it a bit, give it to you in a certain context, means that, or it's become mediated and therefore changed. So what I'm trying to say, and what I'm taking a long time to say here, is that a lot of what we see is not reality, but a lot of what we see is actually a story, right? And it follows the rules very often of a story. Tarantino knows this, and he understands that that is how we live today. And that if you want to tell a story, the only way you can really do it honestly and truthfully is by acknowledging the fact that this story will use other stories to tell itself, and it will have to show how all the characters in a film, just like real people themselves, are deeply influenced by media surrounding them at every turn, right? That's just the condition we live in as modern human beings. It kind of began in the 50s and is accelerated through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and today. A lot of it depends on the progression we've made in our technology, right? But for many decades now, human beings have lived in a kind of secondary reality of mass consumed media. And to just leave that out of the story would be fundamentally dishonest. Well, all of that stuff also has all these kind of philosophical implications because it makes you wonder now which reality is true. It's almost like the mediated reality is in competition with other mediated realities, which are all in competition with reality itself. And so we have all these questions as modern humans around authenticity and performance, between truth and lies, between what's real and what's just a story. These things get blurred. They can be very confusing to discern between each other, right? Which is which? This film concerns a real historical event that happened in the real world to actual people. What Tarantino is going to do is manipulate and change that historical record for his own storytelling purposes. Because in his mind, everything is simply a story, a representation that you can mess around with. Because it's not real, because it's a construct, you can change it. You can use it as material and turn it into something else, because that's what we all do. We all take reality, suck it into our phones, and spit it back out again as a story, a version of ourselves that we prefer. More on this soon. The historical period, at least, seems to be represented with a lot of accuracy. As the movie begins and as we're getting into the story, I want you to look very closely at how we get introduced to the world right from the start. There's lots of music. The song playing to get us going is Treat Her Right by Roy Head, which was a very, very popular song in the 60s. Important to note that a lot of music is used throughout the film, and all the music you hear would have been music the characters themselves would have been very familiar with at the time. There's no music from after 1969 present in the film, as far as I can tell anyway. It's got lots of music. We've got color. We've got these interesting and beautiful characters who are walking on stage. We've got Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski, then we've got Rick Dalton, Cliff Booth. These are all big time movie stars in the real world. And so we bring our expectations of their performance to that experience as well. There's great cars. If you like cars, Brad Pitt drives a cool car, I'll show you now. And all of these kind of provocative, interesting, imaginative camera angles. So Tarantino is known for having a very active camera. And what I mean is that he almost makes the camera a character in itself. The camera moves around a lot. It bumps. It almost dances across the reality it's trying to capture. Um, it's unstable. It's energetic. It's kind of ironic because it's almost like the director is trying to show you that he's holding the camera and he wants you to notice that the camera is something that moves. I think Tarantino has said before that he wants the camera to have a voice in the film, to kind of be a presence. So always look at how and where he puts the camera and how he moves it around. It can be very interesting just to keep track of. For example, a lot of things we see are like, the way we get introduced to characters often not through their face, but through their legs. You know how they walk. You'll film their legs and their feet first. When we see Rick and Cliff driving in the car, Tarantino films it from behind, so the car reverses and turns, and the camera swivels with them, and we get the sense of movement. And the film has this energy to it, this beat, this rhythmic energized rhythm and movement of everything. Like the 60s itself was an energetic time. And so the camera is like got a 60s mentality. It's on the move. It's going forwards. It's doing funny stuff. It's doing weird stuff. Here's Cliff Booth's 1966 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. The period details seems to be very accurate. It's beautiful cars, beautiful people, interesting fashion choices, nice watch, the Ray-Bans, which are very famous at the time. In the background, all the characters are dressed appropriately. We see some African American dudes with a typical afro of the time, and it's all very realistic. And that realism is then played against these moments when the film slips into non-realism. At the 7-minute 30-second mark, again, we now see a film within the film. This film is a reference to one of Tarantino's earlier films from 2009, I think, called Inglourious Bastards. That is how you spell it, by the way. Rick says a lot of violence in that film, and there's a scene we get to see where he basically gets a flamethrower and he toasts some very bad Germans with it, some Nazis with flamethrower, sets them on fire. This again is a calling card of Quentin Tarantino. He loves extreme violence. The more close up and gruesome, the better. He likes his violence to be almost funny and over the top. And also keep in mind that now that at the beginning of the film we've been introduced to the flamethrower, that flamethrower, according to the laws of storytelling and cinema, must come back at some point. The flamethrower needs to be used before the movie is over. So he's kind of signaling to us, now that I'm showing you the flamethrower, you're going to have to wait an hour and a half, but don't worry, it's going to come back and somebody's going to get cooked. Okay. Further connections we see between the various characters in this huge, complicated world the film is setting up for us. At the 15-minute 30-second mark, we see our two heroes drive past a group of hippies. I spoke about the hippies last time. The Flower Children, Peace, Love, Understanding, Timothy Leary's Babies, Turn On, Tune In, Drop Out generation. These are people, young people who had kind of dropped out of society and are living a totally different life as a huge cultural backlash against the previous generation. They were not very popular. And it's when Rick sees them, he says, effing hippie mother effers. They come off as very creepy in the film. They're weird, they're strange. When you first see them, they are digging through trash and they're singing a very kind of weird children's song of some kind. These particular hippies are part of the Manson gang. And this glancing connection between them, Rick and Cliff, is another technique the movie's going to use, is that seemingly random, disparate people from very different worlds will clash, will be brought into conflict against one another. And another connection is that at 17 minutes 45 seconds, the shot opens up on Cielo Drive. And if you know anything about the Tate murder, it's that Sharon Tate, lived on Cielo Drive, which still exists today. I think the house still exists too, I'm not too sure. But so it opens up on there, and we see Rick and Cliff driving into Cielo Drive. And it turns out that Rick is neighbors with Sharon Tate, and that establishes them together in some kind of a link. So now we see in the film how it is that these two very different people are brought together. So this is going to be a film in which randomness reveals some kind of an order. What could be the reverse, where the 60s set off a time in which randomness becomes the order, in which randomness, collision, uncertainty, disorder becomes how the system operates. I think those two things are slightly different, but it could be either one. That was very much the mood of the 60s, though, so maybe it's the latter. In this house, Sharon Tate lives with a new husband, Roman Polanski. Early in the film, they have a visitor who's got long hair and a beard. He's wearing a denim jacket, and he asks for a friend of his who's not there because Sharon Tate is renting the house from this friend. The man with the long, straggly hair and beard turns out to be Charles Manson. And that's, I think, the only time we actually see him in the film, too. So another interesting choice by Tarantino, which is to take the most notorious figure in the story, Charles Manson, and only have him appear in the movie about Sharon Tate's murder for about 30 seconds. Just another interesting choice. The movie's about him, but he's hardly even in it. Sorry about the formatting here. That didn't really pull through too well on my slides and to collaborate. But what I'm trying to show you here is that, the old cliche, art imitates life. But this movie kind of suggests that it goes in the other direction, which is that life sometimes comes to imitate art. It's almost as though there's a reversal in the film, in which what gets made in the culture and by the culture eventually comes true in society, in the real world too. That's how strong the effect of a mediated reality is, that it becomes the reality, right? And I'm saying this because this is the true story is very, very weird, right? Sharon Tate was married to Roman Polanski at the time of her murder. She was pregnant with his child. Roman Polanski had just achieved national, even global fame for making a movie called Rosemary's Baby, which is a very scary film. It's about a woman who falls pregnant with Satan's baby, and she has neighbors who are part of a satanic cult who are, unbeknownst to her, grooming her to give birth to Lucifer's child. Okay, which is, it's really weird that she then, months after her husband made that film, his wife Sharon Tate is murdered by a gang of cult of cult cult psychos in a and murdered in just the most gruesome and chilling way. It's almost like he made the movie and then the movie sort of became real, became true. The other thing maybe Tarantino's trying to get at is, this isn't in the first 20 minutes, but later on in the film, we watch Tate watch herself in one of her own movies. Now, I'm not sure that this literally happened in real life, but what Tarantino's trying to do here is he's trying to use a possible truth to say something truthful about our modern world. Okay. So Sharon Tate watches herself in her own movie and gets like a kick out of it. She enjoys watching it. And she watches audiences' reactions around her too. And that is kind of like how we all live today. We're all able to create a story self, an avatar, put it on social media, and then watch people's reaction to it or watch ourselves back. And it makes you sometimes wonder which your preferred self is. Is my preferred self my actual self, the me in my own head? Or is my preferred, more desirable self the self I project out into the world? That's not a real self. That's a mediated self because you created using technologies, media technologies. Sharon Tate's doing that right there. And it's like her preferred self is the mediated one. But which one is the real one? Which one is the true or authentic one? That's a very hard question to answer. But that's a question we are very familiar and comfortable with living in doubt over these days, because that's what we all do all the time now, in some ways. It's interesting how he chooses to give her these massive glasses as well. It's kind of like the real Sharon Tate has a flaw, which is that her eyesight isn't very good, and that she has to wear these extremely nerdy, unappealing glasses. So the real, quote unquote, real Tate is flawed, but the movie Tate that she's watching on screen is perfect, and her performance is perfect, as indicated by the crowd responses to her character. So you get this kind of duality again, the real Tate versus the fake Tate. But the fake Tate is maybe the preferred one, right? He's just putting that question to us all the time. What's real? What's not real? What's true? What's untrue? Okay, so, and that's all of those things I've just spoken about combined to set up the world and the expectations we have for it in this film. We know that Tate is going to be murdered, But what is the role of Rick and Cliff? Why are they circling around her? Why are we watching TV shows within the movie? Why are we watching movies within the movie? How does all of this random stuff connect into one statement about life? How will it all unfold to reveal the answer that it poses to the question that it poses us throughout? And we'll look at that in the next two lessons. Here, I will now stop. I definitely went over time. Sorry about that. And I'm going to issue you with iTask 1. You will find it under blogs. It is activity 1.2.2 due 21st of August. Let me just quickly get there. I share my screen to show you what it looks like. Let me see here. I think it's this one. Here we are. So activity 1.2.2, it's in your blogs. You can just find it by clicking on blogs and scrolling on 1.2.2. Your instructions are to watch this short video. It's about 90 seconds long. It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood Scene, Rick Dalton going mad in trailer. And then you just have to you just have to answer in at least 100 words for both questions. So in total, the following two questions. What camera angle, shots, movements are used in the scene, and what is the effect of these on the scene? So there you can use your key filmic techniques document that I've put under more resources, and what emotions are evoked in the scene. Emotions evoked in the character and or the audience themselves. And how is this emphasized through mise-en-scène, through the setting and the action? So just answer those two questions for me to complete ICE Task 1. Look out for another video that I will do before Friday. Just this time I promise it will be a quick, like 6 or 7 minutes refresher on how to reference for a movie, specifically a movie in the Harvard style. So if you're not sure, so start the ICE Task, but if you're not sure, watch this video and I'll give you some tips on how to reference for a movie and in general too. Make sure you do reference well in this ICE Task because that is important. I think that's all I wanted to say. We'll have class again on the 7th of August at 6. In that class, I will go over a second sequence in the film called the Spahn Ranch scene that's available on YouTube. Another thing I've done is to, in your more resources, you will find all the way down the bottom a link called a playlist of useful edifying videos. Click on that and it'll take you to a playlist I've created with all videos in it that I have used or mentioned in class, including the Spahn Ranch scene. So watch that ahead of time and we'll look at it in class. Work on your ICE tasks. And if you have any questions, just email me, get hold of me via VC Learn, and I'll do my best to answer you timeously. I know a few new people have joined the class, I think 5 new people. For you guys, just make sure that you catch up with the first recording. I've put it under your more resources folder on VC Learn. Watch the YouTube videos. Start your ICE task. If you have any questions, let me know. And again, I'll do my best to get back to you soon. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening, guys. See you soon. Stay well and keep enjoying your English.